We visited with the theorists in video 4. In this video, I want us to join Raskolnikov on a walk through town, where we see the point of view of the common people, a different part of the human panorama. We will learn something about Raskolnikov, too. Raskolnikov had just chased everyone out of his room, his humanitarian friend, Razumikin, the doctor, and Luzhin, the calculating modern fiancé of his sister. He was alone in a half-crazed delirium and with tons of wild energy. What we learn about his state of mind is worth quoting at length. He knew only one thing, that all this must be ended today, at once, right now. He did not want to live like that. Ended how? Ended by what? Of that he had no idea, nor did he want to think about it. He simply felt and knew everything had to change, one way or another. When he is alone with his conscience, he seems to have an overwhelming desire to confess. And what he does is go for a walk through town. There is a series of encounters with people around town, just as happened in part 1 before he committed the murder. We have a kind of experiment here. We saw Raskolnikov walk around town before he committed the murder in part 1, and here we see Raskolnikov walk around town after he commits the murder in part 2. He even runs into some of the same people. How is Raskolnikov different? In part 1, he was looking for signs as to whether or not he should commit the murder. In part 2, he is seeking relief from his guilt and seeking to establish new connections with humanity. He is seeking distraction and connection. He listens to an organ grinder and comments to a stranger about how he loves street music. Raskolnikov is suddenly social. He goes to the square and feels drawn to talk to all of those present, though they pay him little heed. He decides that he now wants to live no matter how. And those who would throw life away, he calls those people scoundrels. He feels, it seems, pity for all people, including himself. This is his mood when he heads into a bar called the Crystal Palace. This is obviously an important name since it conjures up the utopia of Chernyshevsky's book, What is to be Done? Raskolnikov is looking for newspapers that give an account of what had happened to the pawnbroker. As he finds the newspaper, a man from the police station sits down and strikes up a conversation with him. His name is Zamyatov, and he is suspicious of Raskolnikov. Raskolnikov baits the policeman. He taunts him. Raskolnikov boasts to him about being able to commit a crime with perfect self-possession, though the policeman thinks it would be difficult for anyone to commit a crime without his hands shaking or his conscience betraying him. Raskolnikov brags. He postures. He even at one moment seems to confess to a crime, though it is ambiguous what the crime is. This seems to be a wholly new and almost diabolical Raskolnikov. Does he want to confess, or is something else going on, something more complicated? He is filled with pride, and he tries to demonstrate a great strength in the face of his crime. This will be important as he moves forward. He has the ability to sustain his proud attitude, this taunting attitude, or doesn't he? It will strain him in his effort to regain connections with people, this pride. So we have a new dynamic. He is seeking community and connection on one hand, and he is filled with pride and determination to get away with his crime and to have people almost know that he has gotten away with it. The tension between his desire to confess when alone and his overweening pride when confronted with others is illustrated shortly after he leaves the tavern. I am leaving a couple things out here, but Raskolnikov turns toward the police station and seems ready to confess. But on his way to the police station, he passes the scene of the murder, and he walks almost zombie-like toward the apartment. Things have changed. The apartment has been redecorated. The floor has been washed. There are some workmen there, and Raskolnikov dares them to take him to the police. The workmen look at him with perplexed looks. He keeps daring them to take him to go to the police and asks if they are scared to go there themselves. Finally, the men throw Raskolnikov into the street, commenting on how strange people have been lately. When he's alone after being thrown out, he is again firmly decided about going to the police and knew for certain that it was now all going to end. Things start to get clear. When he is around people, it's the pride. When he is alone, it's the guilt. When around people, he is brash. When he is alone, he wants to confess. But he also wants community. And this is what we see in section 7, the last section of part 2. Raskolnikov is again ready to turn himself in, but he is distracted by a crowd that is gathered around a man who has just been run over by a horse. The man is lying on the ground and is apparently unconscious, and the man ends up being Marmeladov, the drunk quasi-Christian who we saw in part 1 in the tavern. Marmeladov has a family, his second wife, their children, and his daughter from the first marriage, Sonia. And the wife is not in great shape. Katerina Ivanovna has consumption, it seems, or tuberculosis, as we call it today. Anyway, this family is now left without their unreliable father to support them. They would like to bury the man, and they will need some money to live. The sight of his family, already in poverty, moves Raskolnikov. The sight of the old man expiring after having taken confession and holy unction also moves him to tears. The great works of Sonia, the daughter from the first marriage, also move him. Raskolnikov is covered with blood, and not for the first time. But it is the blood of Marmeladov, whom he had done so much to try to save. How different the two blood coverings are, one from his murdered victim and one from a futile attempt to save. But this experience initiates another change in Raskolnikov, a new, boundless sensation of a sudden influx of full and powerful life enters his soul. It is as if he had been granted a pardon, he says to himself. He has a new reason to live, and that is to nurse this family to health, and especially to love their little children. He asks that they will pray for him, and he sees that he has a new way of life open to him. He will become a servant of God, and he gives the family all the money that his mother and sister had saved up to pay his back rent. He now has a duty and a love and a purpose. Here's what he says about himself. Like a man clutching out a straw, his sudden fancy that he too could live, and that there still was life, and that his life had not died with the old crone. The narrator is quick to add the following. It was perhaps a rather hasty conclusion, but he was not thinking of that. There is a new reason for living, but only if he can forget, and he can't. Think about it as you continue reading. Does he try to confess to the police again? How will his new reason for living affect his relations with the police? Can he live with himself? So there are these three elements in Raskolnikov's life: his pride when he is around some kinds of people, his guilt when he is alone, and his longing for connection and community. This man is a complex character, and his character is about to be tested again, because what happens at the end of part 2 is that his mother and sister arrive. He loves them too. How will their arrival affect this complex character? This is where we will start the next video.